They laughed at her stance, dismissed her skill. A quiet girl with unwavering will. But under the ranger's watchful eye, her secrets would make the doubter sigh. From mockery's sting to triumph's call, she'd rise above, outshining them all. Asterisk. Before we dive into Emma's incredible journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you won't miss any of our stories. Now, let's see how a small-town girl turned mockery into mastery. In the small town of Millfield, nestled between rolling hills and dense pine forests, everyone knew everyone else. The streets were quiet, the pace slow, and traditions ran deep. It was the kind of place where people measured each other by reputation, and deviation from the norm was met with suspicion or outright mockery. For Emma Carter, a 28-year-old with a quiet determination and eyes that always seemed to be analyzing the world, Millfield had always been a place of contradictions. She loved its peace, its familiarity, but she often felt trapped by the weight of its expectations. Emma had grown up the only daughter of a former Marine, a man who had taught her to respect discipline, to hold herself steady under pressure, and to take responsibility for her own safety. By the time she reached adulthood, she was a skilled marksman, a hobbyist turned serious shooter who could handle rifles with precision most men in town would struggle to match. Her father's old military manuals lined the shelves of her modest home, alongside meticulous notes she'd written herself, documenting drills, stances, and strategies. It was a crisp autumn morning when Emma decided to attend a local shooting competition, hosted by Millfield's small but proud gun club. She had been practicing for months, perfecting a new stance that emphasized balance, recoil control, and swift target acquisition. Her stance was unorthodox, by conventional standards, feet slightly wider than normal, elbows tucked, eyes aligned, in a way that she had learned from studying Ranger training manuals, but it worked for her. As she entered the club's firing range, she immediately felt the eyes of the regulars on her. The men there were grizzled veterans of the sport, some who had been shooting competitively for decades. They saw her not as a serious competitor, but as a young woman who didn't quite fit the mold. "Look at that stance," one of them whispered to his friend. "She's doing it all wrong. That's ridiculous." Emma smiled politely and set up her rifle, ignoring the murmurs. She was used to it by now. The club had never welcomed her fully. Her skill often intimidated the men who thought the sport belonged to them. But she had learned long ago not to let their opinions shake her focus. She breathed deeply, adjusted her grip, and raised her rifle. The competition began, and Emma's movements were smooth, precise, controlled. She hit target after target with uncanny accuracy, her body seemingly anticipating the recoil, her breathing steady. Whispers of surprise started to ripple through the crowd. "How is she doing that?" someone murmured. Another shook his head in disbelief. Then came the final round, a rapid-fire drill that many considered the hardest part of the event. Emma's hands moved with fluid precision, her unorthodox stance allowing her to absorb the rifle's kick and maintain perfect alignment. When the scores were tallied, she had not only won the round, she had set a new club record. Some of the men were visibly stunned, their earlier mockery replaced with a grudging respect, though pride and stubbornness kept them from admitting it openly. But Emma, as always, remained composed. She had expected little from them and gained much more than she had hoped, proof of her own skill, independent of anyone's approval. That evening, the club announced a special training session with an instructor from outside Millfield, a man known only as Sergeant Harris, who had served in the Army Rangers and now worked as a tactical instructor. The club members were buzzing with excitement, eager to show off their skills, or, in some cases, learn what they thought would be advanced techniques far beyond Emma's abilities. Emma hesitated for only a moment before signing up. Something about the idea of learning from a ranger stirred a deep curiosity inside her. She knew her stance was unconventional, and while she trusted her training, she also wanted to see how it measured up to professional military standards. The next morning, the air at the range was crisp, the sun casting long shadows across the targets. Sergeant Harris arrived, a tall, broad-shouldered man with piercing eyes and a calm, deliberate way of moving. He exuded confidence without arrogance, the kind that made people instinctively pay attention. The club members were eager to impress, lining up to show off their drills. Some executed smooth, textbook motions. Others fumbled slightly under his scrutiny. Then it was Emma's turn. She approached her station with quiet confidence. The murmurs from the men behind her, a mixture of doubt and curiosity. Sergeant Harris observed her silently as she assumed her stance, adjusting her grip and breath. He didn't say a word as she went through the drill, yet he watched every motion with the precision of someone who could see mistakes invisible to the untrained eye. When she finished, there was a long pause. Emma lowered her rifle, her heart steady, but sensing the weight of his gaze. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but commanding, carrying across the range. "Your stance, it's not typical, but it works. Very few can maintain control and accuracy like that under stress. Only Rangers train like that." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. The men who had mocked her now looked like they had swallowed their pride, some even avoiding her gaze entirely. Emma felt a swell of vindication, but it was more than that. It was a deep, quiet satisfaction in being recognized for her skill by someone who understood its value on a level far beyond Millfield. From that moment, Emma knew her journey had only begun. She had proven her competence, yes, but she had also glimpsed a path that could take her far beyond the small-town limits. A path where skill, discipline, and courage mattered more than bias or tradition. Yet she also understood that respect earned this way could attract envy, rivalry, and challenges she had not yet anticipated. As the sun dipped behind the hills and the range emptied, Emma lingered, examining the rifle in her hands. Each notch, each adjustment, each practiced motion was a testament to years of discipline and determination. The world, she realized, might always try to underestimate her, but she had the power to redefine their expectations, not with words, but with results. And deep in the quiet of that small town, Emma Carter made a promise to herself. She would continue to master her craft, no matter the opposition, no matter the mockery. She would not merely participate in the world. They would notice her. They would respect her. And if necessary, she would teach them why underestimating her had been their greatest mistake. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn. A chill lingered in the air, and the low hum of Millfield's waking life crept through the thin walls of her modest home. The quiet streets and early fog made the town feel suspended in time, but Emma felt urgency thrumming through her veins. Yesterday's recognition had ignited something inside her, a spark that refused to be ignored. She wasn't content with local acclaim anymore. She wanted mastery, and the only person in town who could guide her toward that level was Sergeant Harris at the shooting range. A small group had gathered again. Some of the regular club members were eager to prove themselves, though the earlier lesson had humbled a few. They avoided looking at Emma, who stood apart, assembling her rifle with meticulous care. She had learned patience and control over the years, habits drilled into her since childhood. Yet today, there was a nervous energy she couldn't shake. Despite her outward confidence, deep inside, she knew that this training would demand more than skill. It would demand grit, perseverance, and perhaps sacrifices she hadn't yet imagined. Sergeant Harris arrived with his usual measured gait, eyes scanning the range with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. He acknowledged Emma with a nod, but didn't speak. Instead, he set up a series of targets at varying distances, each with unique challenges designed to test reaction time accuracy, and composure under pressure. He began the session with a lecture short, practical, and unapologetically honest. Discipline isn't just about how steady your hands are, he said, his voice firm, but not unkind. It's about how steady your mind is. How you react when everything is chaotic. A rifle is just an extension of your focus. If your mind wavers, the rifle will fail you every time. Emma absorbed every word. Her training at home had emphasized mechanics, stances, and precision. But Harris's perspective went deeper. He wasn't teaching her how to shoot. He was teaching her how to think like a ranger, to anticipate, to adapt, and to dominate fear itself. When it was her turn, Harris didn't offer corrections immediately. Instead, he watched. Emma positioned herself in her unorthodox stance, feeling the weight of his scrutiny and the invisible expectations of the small group surrounding her. She began the first series of shots, each one controlled, deliberate, precise. After she finished, Harris walked toward her slowly. His boots made a low thud against the concrete, a rhythm that seemed to echo in her chest. "You're good," he said. "Better than most I've seen in a long time. But that stance of yours, it can take you further than you know, if you're willing to push yourself." He gestured for her to follow him to a nearby wooded section of the range. Here, he explained, she would learn to shoot while moving, adjusting to angles, and compensating for obstacle skills essential to rangers, but almost unheard of at Millfield's club. The first drill was simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Move through the uneven terrain while maintaining aim on a series of targets. Emma felt the strain immediately. Her legs burned, her arms ached, and the uneven footing tested her balance like never before. Several times she stumbled, feeling the rifle jerk and her aim falter. Harris did not intervene. He only watched, occasionally nodding, sometimes muttering a short observation. "You're stiff," he said after a particularly rough attempt. "Relax, anticipate, flow with the terrain, not against it." Emma tried again, adjusting her steps, breathing deeply, to steady her heartbeat. She felt herself growing more attuned to the rhythm of movement, learning to let her body absorb the recoil and the terrain simultaneously. Every time she fell short, she reminded herself that failure was part of the process. Her father had taught her that discipline meant perseverance, not perfection. Meanwhile, the other club members observed silently. Some began whispering, though none dared approach her. Even in her small town, there was a strange mixture of jealousy and awe whenever she demonstrated skill that surpassed them. Emma had learned to ignore them, but their presence was a subtle pressure, another reminder that proving herself was never just about hitting the target. It was about commanding respect in a world that often discounted her simply for being a woman. By late afternoon, Harris had introduced more advanced drill shooting, while crouched, while retreating, even while simulating a panic scenario. Emma's muscles screamed, her mind wavered at times, but she adapted. By the end of the day, she was drenched in sweat, exhausted, but a sense of accomplishment pulsed through her. Harris's gaze, ever sharp, softened just slightly. "You have potential," he said finally. "But potential isn't enough. You'll need resilience, mental toughness. You'll be tested in ways that make this look easy. Only then will your stance, your skills, mean anything in the real world." As Emma packed up her rifle, she felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had come seeking recognition, but what she received instead was responsibility, the kind that demanded growth, discipline, and self-mastery. She knew that this was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, Emma returned to the range each day. Harris pushed her relentlessly, introducing obstacles, stress drills, and scenarios designed to test her endurance and decision-making. The physical strain was immense, but the mental challenges were even greater. Emma found herself confronting Doubts she hadn't anticipated, memories of past failures, whispers from the town that she wasn't supposed to belong in this world, and her own internal pressure to excel. And yet, through every setback, she persisted. Each day, her confidence grew, not from arrogance, but from proof that she could adapt, survive, and excel under conditions that would crush others. By the end of the second week, Emma noticed subtle shifts in the way the club members regarded her. The whispers were fewer, the skepticism less obvious, replaced by a quiet, reluctant curiosity. A few even asked questions about her stance, and she answered carefully, sharing enough to teach without revealing all her strategies. She had learned early on that true mastery was also a kind of power, one she needed to wield with discretion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the forest cast long shadows across the range, Harris approached her with an uncharacteristic smile. "You're ready for the next stage," he said. "But that stage isn't just about skill. It's about proving yourself when others doubt you, when circumstances are unfair, when everything seems stacked against you. Only then do you know what kind of ranger or person you truly are." Emma looked at him, her heart steady despite the fatigue, her mind alert. She knew this was more than training. It was preparation for the battles she had yet to face, not just at the range, but in the world beyond Millfield. And she was ready. By the third week of training, Emma's routine had become grueling but invigorating. She woke before sunrise, running along the winding dirt roads of Millfield, her breath forming small clouds in the chilly morning air. Afterward, she spent hours at the range repeating drills under Sergeant Harris's watchful eyes, testing herself with obstacles, moving targets, and stressful scenarios that pushed her both physically and mentally. Each day was a test of endurance, focus, and composure. Despite her growing confidence, the social atmosphere of the club remained tense. Many of the long-time male members still struggled to accept her presence. Some masked their resentment with politeness, others with thinly veiled ridicule. One afternoon, as she adjusted her rifle before a timed drill, a man named Bill, a veteran shooter in his 50s, leaned over to a friend and said loud enough for Emma to hear, "She's just lucky. That stance of hers, it won't last under real pressure." Emma's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Years of practice had taught her that silence often spoke louder than argument. She focused instead on her breathing, her stance, her aim. Let them doubt her, she had more important work to do. The next challenge Harris introduced was a simulated ambush scenario. Targets would appear unexpectedly from behind obstacles, forcing shooters to react quickly, make judgment calls, and engage multiple threats in rapid succession. For Emma, it was the perfect test of the skills she had been building: precision, speed, adaptability, and mental toughness. When it was her turn, she moved through the course with a quiet intensity, her body attuned to the rhythm of the targets. She anticipated each pop-up with a calculated movement, absorbed recoil, adjusted for angles, and completed the run flawlessly. But as she reached the last target, a sudden distraction nearly caused her to stumble. One of the other club members, Peter, had deliberately knocked over a barricade during her run, a subtle but dangerous attempt to throw her off balance. Emma froze for a fraction of a second, the rifle wobbling. Anger flared, but she forced herself to take a deep breath, reset her aim, and complete the drill. Every shot hit its mark. The room was silent for a moment before Harris spoke. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly the kind of scenario that separates those who think they're skilled from those who actually are." She didn't just recover, she dominated. The murmurs among the male shooters grew louder, a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. Emma didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her performance had spoken for itself. After the drill, Harris pulled her aside. "Some people will try to test you in ways that are unfair," he said, his eyes steady. "They'll try to distract, sabotage, or intimidate. A true ranger doesn't react with anger. They respond with control. You just proved that. Emma nodded, the lesson sinking deep. It was one thing to handle drills and targets. It was another to maintain composure when confronted with deliberate cruelty. That night, as she cleaned her rifle at home, she reflected on how often women in Millfield and the world beyond were underestimated, doubted, or dismissed entirely. She realized her fight wasn't just about shooting or skill. It was about proving that ability, determination, and courage weren't defined by gender. The following weekend, the club held a local competition that drew participants from neighboring towns. Emma entered, knowing this would be her chance to solidify her reputation, but also aware that her growing prominence had stirred resentment. As she set up her station, she could feel the eyes of the crowd, some supportive, some skeptical. Bill and Peter were there, whispering among themselves, clearly plotting to undermine her. The competition began, and Emma moved with the fluid precision she had honed under Harris's guidance. She executed drills flawlessly, hitting targets that many competitors struggled to engage. But during the rapid-fire round, she noticed subtle interference. Someone had loosened a bolt on one of the target mechanisms, causing the targets to shift unpredictably. A murmur of confusion spread among the shooters, and several competitors fumbled. Emma, however, relied on her training. She adjusted her timing and aim, anticipating the irregular movement, and completed the round without missing a single target. When the results were announced, Emma had not only won, but shattered previous records. Gasps and whispers filled the hall. Bill and Peter avoided eye contact, while others approached her cautiously, offering reluctant congratulations. Harris, standing to the side, gave a rare nod of approval. You didn't just win, he said quietly later. You handled sabotage, distraction, and doubt. That's what separates the competent from the exceptional. For Emma, the victory was deeply satisfying, but it carried a bittersweet undertone. She had earned respect through skill and composure, yet the undercurrent of resentment in the room reminded her that her journey would not be easy. Some people would continue to challenge her, undermine her, or attempt to diminish her accomplishments. Over the following weeks, Emma continued to train, pushing herself harder than ever. Harris introduced night drills, moving targets in low light, conditions and exercises simulating high-pressure emergencies. Emma's body ached, but her mind sharpened. She learned to read her surroundings, anticipate threats, and maintain focus under extreme stress. And yet, the social battles remained. Peter and Bill continued to whisper, sabotage minor drills, and spread rumors about her unconventional methods. But Emma no longer allowed their actions to disturb her. She had discovered an inner strength she hadn't fully realized, the ability to remain calm, disciplined, and determined, even when confronted with deliberate hostility. One evening, after an intense training session, Harris approached her with a serious expression. You've come far, he said. But there's one more lesson you need before you're truly ready. You'll face situations where people will not only doubt your skill, but question your character, your motives, even your courage. How you respond in those moments will define you more than any target you hit. Emma understood. Her journey was no longer just about rifles and drills. It was about resilience, integrity, and standing firm in the face of injustice. She had already proven her ability under pressure, but the real test, she realized, was about to begin. As autumn deepened, Millfield transformed into a tapestry of gold and crimson. The air carried a crisp edge that hinted at winter, and the forest surrounding the town became a labyrinth of shifting shadows and hidden trails. For Emma, the changing season mirrored the evolution of her own journey. Her skills were growing sharper, her confidence steadier, but the challenges she faced were becoming more complex and more personal. At the range that morning, the tension was palpable. Word had spread about Emma's record-breaking performance, and the usual murmur of admiration was now mixed with thinly veiled resentment. Bill and Peter, still nursing bruised egos, seemed determined to undermine her at every opportunity. They lingered at her station, making unnecessary remarks, questioning her choices, and casting sidelong glances that were intended to intimidate. Emma ignored them, focusing instead on the new drills Sergeant Harris had prepared. Today's exercises were designed to simulate high stakes, real-world scenarios, multiple targets appearing simultaneously, moving obstacles, and emergency reloads under stress. Every shot demanded precision, timing, and anticipation. Harris had stressed that these exercises weren't about winning. They were about testing composure, judgment, and adaptability. Emma approached the course with quiet intensity. Her body moved instinctively, a symphony of balance, precision, and focus. She anticipated the sudden pop-ups of targets, adapted to shifting obstacles, and managed to complete the course flawlessly. Yet, in the corner of her vision, she noticed Peter trying another subtle attempt to disrupt her. He had nudged a sandbag that was part of the barricade, hoping it would tip and throw her off balance during a critical sequence, instead of reacting. With frustration, Emma incorporated the shifting barrier into her strategy. She adjusted her stance mid-step, absorbed the minor imbalance, and fired without missing a beat. The lesson Harris had emphasized, the value of calm under pressure, was now a lived experience. When she finished, Harris's expression was one of quiet approval. "You're learning to control not just your skill, but your environment," he said. "Most people panic when things don't go as planned. You adapt. That's what makes the difference between competence and excellence." Despite her success, the social friction in the club intensified. Peter and Bill began spreading rumors, subtly suggesting that Emma's methods were improper or unsafe, attempting to erode her credibility with both new and veteran members. Some club members wavered, uncertain whom to trust, while others watched Emma's calm response with a growing respect. She had learned to accept that her journey wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about integrity, patience, and endurance in the face of persistent antagonism. One evening, Harris approached her with a proposition. "There's a regional competition coming up," he said. "It's bigger than Millfield. More competitors, higher stakes, and more scrutiny. I want you to enter. Not to prove anything to them, but to test yourself in a broader arena." Emma hesitated only briefly. The thought of competing beyond her small town was daunting, but she knew she couldn't remain confined to Millfield forever. Accepting Harris's challenge was more than a competition. It was a step toward proving her own resilience and mastery. Over the next weeks, Emma's training intensified. Harris introduced simulations with moving vehicles, timed engagements, and low-light scenarios. Emma learned to combine mental acuity with physical precision, constantly adjusting to new variables. Her stamina and focus improved, but so did the sense of isolation. Few in Millfield supported her ambition openly, and whispers of disapproval became harder to ignore. Then, one afternoon, an incident occurred that would mark a turning point. During a routine drill, Peter deliberately tried to force Emma into a dangerous misstep by shifting a target at the last second. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to create a potentially hazardous situation. Emma stumbled slightly, but instead of panicking, she recalibrated her approach, corrected her footing, and completed the exercise safely. Harris, who had been observing from the side, immediately intervened. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the surrounding shooters. "This isn't a game. Deliberate interference isn't tolerated here. Skill must be tested through effort, not deception." The room went silent. Peter muttered something under his breath, but No one defended his actions. Emma felt a mix of vindication and quiet sorrow. She had endured subtle sabotage and ridicule for weeks, and while Harris's intervention reinforced her authority, it also underscored the lengths some would go to diminish her achievements. That evening, Emma stayed late at the range, reflecting on her journey. She realized that her struggle wasn't just about marksmanship or even recognition. It was about maintaining integrity in an environment that often rewarded ego, bias, and intimidation. She understood now that her true strength lay not just in her skills, but in her ability to remain composed, disciplined, and principled under constant pressure. A few days later, Harris introduced a final preparatory drill before the regional competition. It was the most demanding exercise yet, a multi-target scenario combining moving obstacles, time constraints, and high-pressure decision-making, all designed to test the shooter's skill, mental acuity, and emotional resilience. Emma approached the course with determination. Every movement, every shot was precise. She anticipated the unexpected, adapted to challenges, and maintained focus even when minor disruptions occurred. When she finished, Harris's expression was unreadable at first, but then a rare smile appeared. "You're ready," he said simply, "not just to compete, but to excel. You've learned control, resilience, and integrity. Now it's time to show the world what you can do." Emma felt a quiet surge of pride. The road had been long and arduous, filled with ridicule, sabotage, and doubt. Yet she had emerged stronger, disciplined, and unwavering. The regional competition was not just a test of skill, it was an opportunity to cement her reputation, to prove to herself and to everyone who had doubted her that courage, focus, and integrity could triumph over prejudice and sabotage. As the sun set behind Millfield's hills, casting long shadows across the range, Emma packed her rifle with care. She understood that the journey ahead would demand more than skill. It would require courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief in herself. And for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited beyond the small town she had called home. The morning of the regional competition dawned bright and clear, with crisp air carrying the faint scent of pine from the surrounding forests. Emma woke before sunrise, the familiar blend of nerves and determination coursing through her veins. Today wasn't just another drill or local competition. It was the stage where her years of training, discipline, and resilience would be tested under the scrutiny of strangers, many of whom were seasoned shooters from across the state. At the venue, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Flags and banners marked the perimeter of the range, and competitors from every corner of the region set up their stations. Emma's heart pounded not with fear, but anticipation. She had trained for months under Sergeant Harris, enduring physical strain, mental pressure, and social antagonism. She had learned to stay calm when challenged, to adapt when obstacles arose, and to maintain integrity when others tried to sabotage her. Today, all of that experience would matter. As she walked toward her assigned lane, she noticed some familiar patterns: competitors sneering, subtle whispers, and glances meant to intimidate. Emma's reputation as the record-setting shooter from Millfield had preceded her, and not everyone welcomed her presence. Yet she felt a quiet confidence. Harris's lessons echoed in her mind: control your environment, anticipate challenges, and remain composed. That mindset had carried her through sabotage and ridicule before. It would carry her today. The competition began with a timed accuracy drill. Targets popped up at varying distances, some partially obscured by obstacles. Emma's stance, unconventional, yet perfected through months of disciplined practice, allowed her to absorb recoil smoothly, maintain alignment, and fire with precision. Shots rang out rapidly, and when the round ended, her score placed her at the top, A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Some competitors shot sharp, incredulous glances. Others tried to hide admiration behind stoic expressions. The next stage was a rapid-fire obstacle course, designed to test agility, judgment, and composure under pressure. Emma moved fluidly, her body instinctively adjusting to terrain and shifting obstacles. She hit each target with precision, even when minor distractions were introduced: wind gusts, shifting barricades, and unexpected target movements. At one point, a competitor from another town attempted a subtle disruption by stepping too close and creating a minor visual obstruction. Emma didn't flinch. She adapted instantly, recalibrating her aim without breaking focus. By mid-afternoon, whispers began to circulate. The competitors who had initially dismissed her were now watching with curiosity and, in some cases, respect. Bill and Peter, who had once tried to undermine her, now avoided her gaze entirely, their expressions a mixture of frustration and reluctant acknowledgement. Emma didn't seek revenge. She had learned that composure and results were far more powerful than confrontation. The final stage of the competition was the most grueling. A high-stakes multi-target scenario combining moving obstacles, timed engagements, and surprise environmental challenges. This stage demanded everything Emma had learned: physical endurance, precision, mental acuity, and emotional resilience. As the countdown began, Emma took a deep breath, centering herself. She moved through the course with fluidity and focus, each shot deliberate and controlled. Targets appeared unpredictably, some partially hidden, others moving at high speeds. She anticipated every motion, adjusted her stance instinctively, and completed the course with flawless accuracy. When the dust settled, the judges announced the scores. Emma had not only won, but set a record for the competition. The crowd erupted in applause. Competitors who had doubted her now approached with cautious admiration. Bill and Peter, humbled and silent, offered curt nods. Sergeant Harris, standing to the side, finally allowed a small smile of pride. After the award ceremony, Emma was approached by several competitors and instructors from other towns. "Your technique is remarkable," one said. "I've never seen someone adapt to challenges like that so quickly." Another added, "You've earned this entirely on skill and composure. Truly impressive." As Emma collected her trophy, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from the recognition itself, but from the journey that had brought her here. She had faced ridicule, sabotage, and doubt. She had endured grueling training, emotional strain, and social isolation. And through it all, she had remained true to herself, her discipline, and her integrity. That evening, back in Millfield, word of her victory spread quickly. The small town that had once mocked her now regarded her with admiration and respect. Neighbors she had grown up with offered congratulations, and even some of the club members who had doubted her earlier expressed regret for their dismissiveness. Emma realized that respect earned through perseverance, skill, and composure carried far more weight than any fleeting recognition based on popularity or bias. Yet, the victory was more than just personal. Emma's journey had shown others, especially the young women in her community, that courage, discipline, and resilience could overcome prejudice and doubt. She had become a living example of what could be achieved when one refused to be limited by the expectations of others. As the sun set over Millfield's hills, Emma stood alone at the edge of the forest, the trophy in her hand and the cool evening breeze brushing her face. She reflected on how far she had come, the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the inner strength she had discovered. She understood now that true mastery was not just about skill with a rifle, but about courage, integrity, and the ability to remain steadfast when the world tried to undermine you. And in that quiet moment, Emma Carter knew that her journey was far from over. The small town that had once doubted her had witnessed her triumph, but her own standards remained higher than anyone else's. She had proven herself. Yes, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that no amount of mockery, sabotage, or doubt could deter her from achieving excellence. The days following the regional competition were filled with a mixture of triumph and quiet reflection. Emma returned to Millfield not just as a champion, but as someone who had transcended the limitations that others had tried to impose upon her. Yet she sensed that the journey was not truly complete. Winning the competition had proven her skill, but the lingering whispers of doubt, envy, and misunderstanding still hovered among some townspeople and former club members. Emma knew she needed more than trophies. She needed lasting respect, clarity, and closure. It all came to a head one crisp morning when she was invited to a community event at the local town hall. A mayor and several prominent citizens had gathered to celebrate local achievers, but Emma soon realized the meeting had another purpose. Bill and Peter were present, and though they avoided eye contact with her at first, their expressions carried the familiar undercurrent of resentment. Emma's heart remained steady. She had learned the value of composure, and this confrontation was merely another obstacle to navigate. As the ceremony progressed, the mayor stepped up to the podium, highlighting Emma's accomplishments in the young regional competition. The applause filled the hall, and for a moment, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. But then, quietly, Peter stood and addressed the audience. He attempted to cast doubt on Emma's achievements, implying that her success had been a fluke or that her methods were unconventional. A hush fell over the crowd. Emma felt a brief flash of frustration, but she remembered Harris's lessons. Control the moment, speak with clarity, and let integrity do the work. She stepped forward, her voice calm yet firm. "I understand that some may question my methods," she said. "But every step of this journey, every drill, every sacrifice, every challenge was earned through discipline, practice, and respect for the craft. My success is not just mine. It is the culmination of years of training, guidance, and perseverance. I don't need to justify my approach, because the results speak for themselves." The room remained silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly, people began nodding in acknowledgement. One by one, fellow competitors, instructors, and community members voiced their support, praising not just her skill, but her courage, integrity, and unwavering dedication. Bill and Peter shifted uncomfortably, unable to counter the weight of undeniable truth. Then Sergeant Harris, who had quietly watched the exchange, stepped forward. "Emma has shown us all what it means to train, endure, and succeed with honor. What she has accomplished goes beyond trophies or recognition. It's a lesson in resilience, integrity, and character. Only someone truly dedicated, disciplined, and mentally strong can achieve this. She didn't just train to win. She trained to excel, to adapt, and to inspire." The hall erupted in applause. Emma felt a deep warmth, not from the acknowledgement itself, but from the validation of her journey. She had endured ridicule, sabotage, and doubt, yet she had remained steadfast. Her perseverance had not only proven her own worth, but it had inspired respect and admiration in others. In the following weeks, Emma's story began to reach beyond Millfield. Local newspapers, shooting clubs, and even regional media outlets covered her journey, emphasizing the discipline, courage, and skill that had brought her to the top. Young women in particular reached out to her, seeking advice, mentorship, and guidance in pursuing their own ambitions. Emma welcomed this role, understanding that her journey could empower others to overcome their own challenges. One quiet evening, as she stood on the porch of her family's home, the forest hills glowing gold in the sunset, Emma reflected on the long path she had traveled. She thought of the mornings filled with rigorous drills, the moments of doubt and ridicule, the minor acts of sabotage, and the victories both small and monumental. Each experience had shaped her, strengthened her, and revealed the depth of her. Resilience.Emma realized that the ultimate victory was never about defeating others. It was about mastering herself. She had confronted fear, adversity, and prejudice, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably confident. She had learned to trust her instincts, refine her skills, and maintain integrity even when the world sought to diminish her dot, and in that realization, Emma found her greatest satisfaction. The mockery of the past had faded, replaced by respect, admiration, and the quiet knowledge that she had remained true to herself. She had trained like a ranger, not for the approval of others, but for her own mastery, and that mastery had earned her more than recognition. It had earned her the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing she could rise above any challenge, any doubt, and any obstacle dot. As the stars emerged over Millfield, Emma Carter stood tall, rifle safely stored, heart steady, and spirit unwavering. Her journey had begun in ridicule, but it had ended in triumph, not through vengeance or confrontation, but through courage, discipline, and an unwavering belief in herself. And with that, she knew she was ready for whatever lay ahead.